The Miller family home stood proud on Elm Street, its pristine white exterior and manicured lawn a perfect reflection of their status in Riverside, Ohio. For the 15,000 residents of this conservative town, the Millers represented everything to aspire to. Richard, at 52, served as a respected deacon at Riverside Baptist Church. Susan, his devoted wife, organized the church bake sales and charity drives with unmatched efficiency. Their son Brandon, the star quarterback with college scouts already circling, embodied the all-American dream with his athletic build and charismatic smile. Then there was Alex Thompson Miller, the 19-year-old adopted son, brilliant and reserved. His academic achievements brought honor to the family name. Yet something in his eyes suggested a deeper story beneath the polished surface. The whispers around town never reached his ears directly, but he felt them in the lingering glances, the sudden silences when he entered rooms, the way Pastor Williams always asked how he was adjusting, even 9 years after his adoption. The tension in the Miller household had been growing for weeks. Alex noticed Brandon's friendly demeanor evaporating whenever they were alone, replaced by cold stares and cutting remarks. It started small, a misplaced textbook. His laundry accidentally left damp in the washing machine. His car suddenly out of gas before school. But the undercurrent felt dangerous, like swimming in waters where something unseen circled beneath. On a Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Alex had borrowed Brandon's phone to call Susan when their landline went dead during a storm. A text notification flashed across the screen. "Miss you so much. Can't wait to hold you again tonight. Jake." Before Alex could process what he'd read, Brandon appeared in the doorway, his face transforming from surprise to rage in an instant. "What the hell are you doing?" Brandon lunged forward, ripping the phone from Alex's hands with such force that Alex stumbled backward into the wall. Brandon's eyes weren't just angry, they were terrified. "I wasn't," Alex began, but Brandon's forearm pressed against his throat, cutting off both words and air. "If you tell anyone what you saw, I'll destroy you," Brandon whispered, his voice trembling with a fear disguised as hatred. "No one would believe you anyway." The next morning, Alex discovered his small pride flag missing from his desk drawer. In its place lay a glossy pamphlet titled "Healing the Broken Faith-Based Restoration Therapy for Troubled Youth." The message couldn't have been clearer. Brandon wasn't just hiding his own secret. He was preparing to weaponize Alex's truth against him. Over the following weeks, the campaign intensified. Anonymous complaints about Alex reached his guidance counselor. His social media accounts received strange messages from fake profiles. Once, he overheard Brandon on the phone discussing troubled teen facilities and intervention options while looking directly at Alex's college acceptance letter to Northwestern. As Alex quietly documented each incident, he realized with growing dread that Brandon wasn't just lashing out. He was systematically building a case to convince their parents that Alex needed help. The kind of help that had destroyed countless young lives in places where conversion therapy remained legal. The kind of help no one returned from unchanged. Alex faced an impossible choice: flee the family that had given him a home, or fight back against the brother determined to erase who he truly was. What he didn't know was that beneath the surface of this perfect family lay secrets far deeper than his own. Secrets that would soon crack the foundation of everything they built. For more powerful stories of courage and identity, follow Heart Stories, where real experiences change hearts and minds. The weather in Riverside matched Alex's darkening reality. Oppressive heat punctuated by violent thunderstorms that rattled windows and set car alarms wailing. During one such storm, Alex discovered Brandon's master plan while searching for a flashlight in the garage. Hidden beneath fishing tackle was a manila folder containing printouts of fabricated Grindr conversations with Alex's photos clearly photoshopped onto fake profiles. Brandon had meticulously documented these false exchanges, complete with timestamps and location data. Attached was a handwritten schedule titled Intervention Timeline, with a family dinner marked for the following Friday. Notes in Brandon's precise handwriting detailed how his girlfriend Ashley would accidentally discover the evidence. creating the perfect storm of family shame and religious panic that would make conversion therapy seem like the only solution. A chill of recognition ran through Alex despite the summer heat. He'd read enough survivor accounts to know what came next: the tearful confrontations, the concerned church members, the isolation from friends, and finally, the quiet disappearance to a facility where phone calls were monitored and letters censored, where treatment meant systematic destruction of identity until nothing remained but a hollow shell, repeating approved phrases. That night, as Alex lay awake listening to the house settle, a pebble struck his window. In the glow of the security light stood a tall, slender young man with anxious eyes. Jake shifted nervously as Alex slipped outside. "He's going to hurt you," Jake whispered, glancing toward Brandon's darkened window. "I can't let that happen. Not after what I've seen at those places." Jake revealed that Brandon's plan was already in motion. Pastor Williams had begun private counseling sessions with Richard, focusing on family healing and addressing wayward influences. The youth group had been subtly instructed to distance themselves from Alex. Even Northwestern University had received an anonymous ethics complaint questioning Alex's character. With Jake's warning and his own evidence, Alex began counter-surveillance. A small camera hidden in his backpack captured Brandon's violent outbursts when no one was watching. Screenshots preserved threatening text messages. Carefully documented financial records showed Brandon's payments for hotel rooms where he met Jake in secret. The pressure mounted from all directions. Church ladies cornered Susan after services with veiled questions about Alex's spiritual health. Teachers reported his distracted behavior to the school counselor. An anonymous call to Child Protective Services claimed the household was unstable due to Alex's acting out. Richard grew increasingly distant, disappearing into his study for hours, emerging with reddened eyes. Sometimes Alex heard him muttering a name in his sleep: Tommy, though no one by that name had ever been mentioned in family history. Susan watched everything with worried eyes that seemed to see more than she acknowledged. Once, she quietly placed a hand on Alex's shoulder as he studied and whispered, "Whatever happens, remember who you are." Before he could respond, she slipped away, leaving him to wonder if she suspected what was coming. The Wednesday before the planned intervention, Alex discovered conversion therapy brochures spread across the dining room table. One facility in particular was highlighted: New Dawn Restoration Center in rural Idaho, known for its isolation and strict discipline. A check for the deposit lay beneath, already signed by Richard. That night, Brandon sent a group text to the family announcing a special dinner on Friday. "Important family matters to discuss," he wrote. "Pastor Williams will join us." As Alex's phone lit up with the message, so too did his resolve. He would not disappear quietly. He would not let fear win. The evidence he'd gathered now filled an entire external hard drive: videos, texts, financial records, and most damning of all, intimate exchanges between Brandon and Jake that revealed not just their relationship, but Brandon's tortured self-hatred. The perfect storm Brandon had engineered was about to break, but not in the direction he expected. Sometimes the most dangerous person wasn't the one with the most power, but the one with nothing left to lose. As thunder rolled across Riverside that night, Alex made his decision. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about truth, however painful it might be. By exposing Brandon's secret, Alex risked becoming exactly what he feared most: someone who used another's vulnerability as a weapon. Yet sometimes the line between justice and vengeance blurred when the alternative was destruction. The question wasn't whether Alex would fight back, but whether anything of this family would remain when the fight was over. Friday evening arrived with unnatural stillness. The dining room gleamed under Susan's meticulous preparation. Fine china, polished silver, crystal glasses that caught the chandelier light. Pastor Williams arrived first, Bible tucked under his arm, expression grave as a funeral director's. Brandon appeared next, Ashley clinging to his arm like a stage prop, both dressed with calculated perfection. Richard emerged from his study, face drawn and pale. Susan moved silently between kitchen and dining room, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged serving dishes. Alex entered last, carrying a simple black portfolio that seemed to weigh more than its physical contents. No one noticed it at first. Attention focused on Pastor Williams's opening prayer, asking for divine guidance in difficult family matters. Brandon sat with practiced solemnity, occasionally squeezing Ashley's hand for dramatic effect while avoiding his parents' eyes. "We've gathered today," Brandon began once the prayer concluded, "because I can no longer remain silent about something threatening our family." His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion. "I've discovered something about Alex that requires immediate intervention." Richard stared into his untouched glass of water. Susan's knuckles whitened around her napkin. Pastor Williams nodded encouragingly. "Before you continue," Alex interrupted, his voice steadier than he felt, "I think everyone should see what I've discovered." He opened the portfolio and placed its contents on the table: printed text conversations, financial records, hotel receipts, and a small USB drive. "What is this?" Richard asked, confusion clouding his features. "Evidence," Alex replied, maintaining eye contact with Brandon, whose face had drained of color. "Brandon has been in a relationship with Jake Donovan for over a year while systematically terrorizing me for being gay." The silence that followed held the weight of decades of unspoken truths. Brandon lunged across the table, sending glasses shattering to the floor. "He's lying," he shouted, voice breaking. "He's trying to deflect from his own perversion." While Alex connected the USB drive to the dining room television and played the first video, Brandon threatening him. Brandon meeting Jake at the abandoned warehouse on Route 9, Brandon violently punching walls while screaming about how he couldn't be like this. Ashley stared at Brandon with dawning comprehension before silently gathering her purse and leaving without a word. Pastor Williams began quoting scripture about abomination, but his voice faded as Richard suddenly slammed his fist against the table. "Enough!" Richard shouted, his voice raw with an emotion deeper than anger. "Everyone out! Pastor, thank you for coming, but this is a family matter now." After Pastor Williams' reluctant departure, Richard collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. "Tommy," he whispered, the name emerging like a ghost. "Who's Tommy?" Alex asked softly. Susan reached for Richard's hand. "Tell them," she urged. "It's time." Richard's shoulders shook as decades of carefully constructed composure crumbled. "Tommy was my brother," he managed between ragged breaths. "He was gay. In 1987, after our parents sent him to a place like the one in those brochures, he hanged himself in our garage." His eyes met Brandon's, then Alex's. "I found him. I was 16. Brandon stared at his father with disbelief. "You never told me you had a brother." "Because I was ashamed," Richard admitted, tears flowing freely now. "Not of him, of myself. I said nothing when they sent him away. I prayed for him to be fixed instead of accepting him. And then he was gone, and I've spent my life trying to atone by being the perfect Christian." His gaze fixed on the conversion therapy brochures. "I nearly made the same mistake again." Brandon suddenly bolted from the table, grabbing his keys and disappearing into the night. Susan immediately moved to follow, but Richard gently stopped her. "He needs time, we all do." Alex sat motionless, the vindication he'd expected replaced by a profound sadness. This wasn't just about him or Brandon. It was about generational trauma passing like a poisoned inheritance. The truth had emerged, but it hadn't set anyone free, at least not yet. Hours later, as the family sat in stunned silence in the living room, a call came from the local hospital. Brandon had been found unconscious in Jake's apartment after swallowing a bottle of sleeping pills. The war between them had ended with casualties on all sides, leaving a family broken open to face not just their present crisis but decades of buried pain. As they rushed to the hospital through the rain-slicked streets, Alex realized that exposing secrets was only the beginning. The harder work, healing, still lay ahead. News travels with supernatural speed in small towns. By Sunday morning, half of Riverside knew about Brandon's hospitalization, though the reasons circulated in whispered variations. By Monday, battle lines were being drawn across Facebook groups and church prayer chains. The Miller family's perfect facade had shattered, revealing the messier, more complicated humanity beneath. Brandon survived his suicide attempt, but the psychiatric hold that followed kept him isolated from the gathering storm. The hospital became neutral territory, the only place where judgments momentarily suspended in the shared concern for a life nearly lost. Jake remained a constant presence in the waiting room, enduring suspicious glances with quiet dignity. Richard took a leave of absence from his deacon duties, his absence from Sunday service noted with pointed comments. Susan attended alone, chin held high despite the sanctuary's sudden pockets of silence whenever she passed. After the sermon, Pastor Williams's thinly veiled discourse on moral decay, she gathered her belongings and walked out, never to return to those pews again. Alex filed a restraining order against several anonymous accounts that had escalated from online harassment to death threats spray-painted on his car. When the local police seemed reluctant to investigate, citing teenage pranks, Susan contacted a civil rights attorney who specialized in cyberbullying cases. The FBI's involvement followed swiftly once the attorney demonstrated the coordinated nature of the attacks. The school board called an emergency meeting after several students organized a walkout in support of Alex. Others countered with religious protests. Parents shouted over each other about values and inclusion until the superintendent suspended the session, promising policy reviews that never materialized. Meanwhile, in a sterile hospital room, Brandon confronted his demons under the guidance of Dr. Elena Patel, a psychiatrist specializing in LGBTQ+ youth trauma. Each session peeled back layers of self-hatred cultivated through years of religious messaging and cultural pressure. His recovery wasn't linear. Rage gave way to grief, then to numbness, then to tentative acceptance of parts of himself he tried to destroy in Alex. Richard spent hours in the hospital chapel, not in prayer but in silent reconciliation with Tommy's memory. He brought old photographs, evidence of a brother whose existence he'd nearly erased from family history. Sometimes Susan joined him, her hands steady in his as they mourned not just Tommy, but the decades lost to fear. The Miller home became both sanctuary and battleground. Conservative neighbors stopped waving. Packages of baked goods from progressive church members appeared on the porch alongside anonymous letters condemning their moral failing. Local news vans parked at the corner until restraining orders forced them back. When Brandon returned home after 3 weeks, the family gathered awkwardly in the living room, strangers relearning each other's contours. The silence stretched until Brandon spoke, voice raw from disuse. "I'm sorry," he said simply, eyes fixed on the carpet. "I was trying to destroy in you what I couldn't face in myself." Alex nodded, acceptance rather than forgiveness. The latter would take far more time. Susan announced they'd begin family therapy with Dr. Patel, non-negotiable for everyone. Richard hesitantly mentioned a different church he'd visited, one with a rainbow flag displayed prominently near its entrance. The outside pressure continued mounting. Brandon's football scholarship was under review. Alex's Northwestern acceptance remained intact only after intervention from national LGBTQ+ advocacy groups. Richard's contracting business lost several church clients, but gained unexpected support from younger families moving into the area. As summer faded into fall, Alex spoke at a contentious school board meeting about anti-bullying policies. His measured testimony went viral when he refused to be silenced by interruptions, calmly citing statistics while protesters shouted. Unexpected allies emerged, teachers who'd remained silent before, parents who'd never spoken publicly about their own LGBTQ+ children, even former classmates who admitted their complicity in past bullying. The battles weren't always victories. For every step forward came painful setbacks. Brandon and Alex navigated an uneasy truce, healing happening in jagged increments rather than smooth transitions. Richard struggled to reconcile faith with family, sometimes slipping into old patterns before catching himself. Susan became the family's fiercest advocate, challenging lifelong friends who suggested they were praying for the boys to change. What none of them anticipated was how their private crisis would become a catalyst for larger community transformation. Their family had been broken, but in its reconstruction, something stronger and more authentic was slowly emerging, not just for them, but for others trapped in similar silence. Winter settled over Riverside, snow smoothing the town's rough edges into deceptive tranquility. Behind closed doors, painful growth continued. Brandon sat across from Jake in a small cafe 2 towns over, hands wrapped around a coffee mug to stop their trembling. This was their first public outing, a quiet act of courage after months of therapy. Brandon still startled at sudden movements, expecting judgment from every corner, but Jake's steady presence anchored him to this new reality they were carefully building. "I saw Alex yesterday," Brandon said, voice low. "He's speaking at the state capitol next week about the conversion therapy ban." Jake nodded, understanding the unspoken significance. "Are you going to go?" Brandon's hesitation contained months of healing work. "I think I need to," he finally answered. Not just for him, for Tommy too. At home, Richard sorted through old photographs, creating a memorial album for the brother he had once erased. Some mornings, Susan would find him speaking softly to Tommy's image, apologizing for decades of silence. His departure from Riverside Baptist had been painful, but necessary. Now he attended River of Hope Community Church, where Pastor Diana Robinson welcomed questioning as part of faith rather than weakness to be corrected. Susan had transformed most dramatically, channeling her organizational skills into establishing Riverside's first P-flag chapter. What began as 4 people meeting in their living room grew to 20, then 50 parents seeking guidance and community. Her name appeared in local papers as an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ+ youth rights. When asked what changed her, she simply responded, "My children taught me that love isn't about approval, it's about acceptance." The school district, forced by legal pressure and changing community standards, implemented comprehensive anti-bullying policies with specific protections for LGBTQ+ students. Teachers underwent mandatory training on creating inclusive classrooms. The same football field where Brandon had once been celebrated now featured rainbow flags during Pride Month, though not without ongoing controversy. Alex's testimony at the state capitol became a turning point. Standing at the podium, voice steady despite his racing heart, he shared not just his story, but Brandon's, with Brandon's permission. He spoke about Tommy, about generational trauma, about the difference between hiding and healing. When he finished, legislators from both parties approached with questions that revealed genuine desire to understand rather than political posturing. The legislation passed by a narrow margin. While the new law couldn't erase decades of damage, it ensured that future generations of Ohio's LGBTQ+ youth would be protected from institutional efforts to change their identity. The federal civil rights case against the school district for failing to protect Alex from harassment ended in a landmark settlement. Beyond financial compensation, it mandated systemic changes that became a blueprint for other districts nationwide. Alex directed most of the funds toward establishing a scholarship for LGBTQ+ adopted youth pursuing higher education. Brandon and Alex's relationship remained complicated, not the easy brotherhood of childhood fantasy, but something hard-won and honest. They would never be best friends, but they had reached something more valuable, mutual respect born from shared trauma and recovery. Brandon's athletic career took a different path as he became an advocate for mental health awareness in sports. Speaking openly about his suicide attempt and internalized homophobia, the Millers legally changed Alex's name from Thompson Miller to simply Miller, his choice, symbolizing full belonging rather than conditional acceptance. The paperwork felt ceremonial, acknowledging what had become true through fire rather than blood. Richard retired from contracting to write a memoir about Tommy, faith, and reconciliation. Susan expanded P-Flag's outreach to rural communities where isolation compounded prejudice. Their home became known as a safe haven for young people questioning their place in families unable to accept them. On graduation day, as Alex delivered the valedictorian address to a divided community still navigating its own transformation, he looked out at the faces watching him, some supportive, others resistant, many somewhere in between. Change hadn't swept through Riverside like revolution, but seeped in slowly like water reshaping stone. Families aren't perfect, he concluded, meeting Brandon's eyes in the front row. Communities aren't either. But when we choose truth over comfort, when we face our fears instead of projecting them onto others, we create space for healing that extends beyond ourselves. The applause wasn't universal, but it was genuine, the sound of a community beginning to reckon with its own complexity. What would you have done in Alex's position? Would you have fought back or walked away? Has your family ever faced a transformational crisis that changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments and follow Heart Stories for more powerful narratives that remind us we're never alone in our struggles.